Hello again, Struckweb. Today I'm bringing you another build for the Railmaster class in Torchlight Frontiers, and this one is the Spike Drive Flash, which is implementing the two newly released skills for this class, which are Spike Drive and Lantern Flash. This build is going all in the lineage skill tree, so we're maxing out blasting charge for vulnerability, we're maxing out hammer spin for escape and for its additional synergy skill. We're maxing out ghost rain for when we need to do single target damage or linear AoE damage, or just to snipe a target far away out of the reach of our spike drive. And then we also put some points in all the other skills, such as spawn for the extra synergy and such as flying peaks for the extra endurance regeneration synergy. The rest remaining points are optional and you can place them in whichever train car you want, but make sure to max out the lineage ones. The build is simple to play, spamming spike drives, using blasting charge in order to debuff the enemies with vulnerability, and using a lantern flash to blind the enemies and do some fire damage while doing that. I'm gonna quickly go through some of the skill picks in detail, then check some of the suggested gear, and then quickly go through the pets, the relic suggestion, synergies, and show you a bit of more gameplay and tips how to play the build. When it comes to the skills for this Railmaster build, I decided to go predominantly for the lineage tree since it's centered around the two new skills, again around Spike Drive and Lantern Flash. So you can see I've kind of taken blasting charge to apply vulnerability to the enemies to make them take more damage. Then I've decided to take hammer spin, of course, for extra movement speed and for escape mechanic. This one I've taken only for the damage reduction in melee combat and just so I can unlock things further. I just decided to max it out, but you may not want to max it out if you really don't need that damage reduction in melee combat. Then you might actually want that though, because you would be up close with Spike Drive. Then this one is just for the endurance recharge rate, but feel free to use it like this maybe. And Lantern Flash, of course, new skill. I really wanted this in the build together with Spike Drive. This allows you to burn the enemies and to blind them. Pretty nice, blinding them to make sure they're not hitting you as much. And this also gives you damage versus stun, blinded or slowed targets, which they will be if you're using this or if you're using this. So that's a good synergy. This is slowing, this is blinding, and this is giving you extra damage against stun, blinded or slowed targets. This can also stun them, by the way. So you might rethink maybe putting this into the build and not putting Ghost Rain into the active skills. Ghost Rain I like using. This healing for 5 seconds after using a lineage skill is nice, but it's very misleading. It's very misleading. It's supposed to be for the potions. So if you're not using a potion, this is not really helping you much in regards to the synergy, and this synergy really needs to be reworked and they need to make it more impactful because now it's underwhelming. Ghost Rain is nice for when you want to snipe enemies far away that Spike Drive would not reach, or when there's an enemy with a lot of HP. Spike Drive would not be as efficient as Ghost Rain on a single target that is a boss or something like that. So Ghost Rain would come handy here. And when it comes to the other remaining skill points, you really don't need to put them anywhere, but something I can tell you is shield car is always a good place to spend some points. So you can put some points into build train and then maybe go into shield car. Shield car would allow you, if you want to mix match the build and maybe use shield car like this, you might be able to kind of get some a lot of not some but a lot of damage reduction. If you're dying, if you want to be pushing harder difficulties, you might want to use the shield car, but I would suggest to try and play the build the way I set it up to see if you like it. I personally don't mind using some of the relic skills, but if you don't want to be using the relic skills, you can use a basic attack here, or you can use something else. I would avoid using flying picks because it would be using up your endurance, and pound might be nice if you swap something out, but try to avoid using too many endurance skills and focus on the endurance being used by spike drive and by blasting charge. And blasting charge is only for the start of the combo, so you go for a blasting charge, then you maybe blind the enemies and then you start smashing your hammer. Or you can just smash your hammer a few times before without blasting charge if there's no need for blasting charge, if it's just rush mobs that you can just two-shot with spike drive. And the same goes for Ghost Rain. You can use it when needed for sniping, as I said, and the same goes for the relic weapon. Regardless whichever you pick, you can pick bleeding if you're using bleeding, you can pick fire if you're using fire, poison if you're using poison. When it comes to the blood frenzy or whatever, just use it when needed. Gear wise, as I said, just use whatever weapon matches your relic weapon or whatever relic weapon matches your weapon. In either case, you want to be synergizing with them unless you want to be stacking multiple ailments, then by all means go and mix match them. The build is kind of flexible, so it doesn't have to be using something specific, but I would really suggest a fire. I would suggest a fire relic because this causes burning and it will synergize well. So if you have access to a flaming destroyer, you might want to use one. So decide for yourself what you need more and pick a relic that matches this. If I were to suggest a burning destroyer, a flaming destroyer, I would suggest one that probably doesn't use sword smash unless you really want it. So something like this setup is not a bad one, although this one was glitched and has one extra point, so I'm avoiding using it. But yeah, pick one that you like, pick one that fits your playstyle, and just decide whether you want to use the active skill or whether you want to be using basic attack here or whether you want to be using something else. When it comes to the other gear choices, I would very strongly suggest Endurance Regen stacking. This is the key to being able to spam spike drive as much as you can. If you have a focus that gives you 2 times Endurance Regen like this one and can be enchanted with 2 or 3 stats, try to get at least 2 more Endurance Regen stats. Endurance Regen can also come from the helmet, so having a helmet with Endurance Regen and preferably Gearwork would be amazing for farming, even if it's not a high level one and you're losing some high hit defenses, but this one is amazing. 7.9 extra Endurance Regen, Gearwork, so the only thing that's missing here is this being high level and having 2 or 3 sockets where I can put some more Endurance Regen. So keep that in mind, Endurance Regen is really needed and it really helps this build. Of course, Gearwork can come from gloves and helmets. Keep that in mind if you want to be stacking that. Attack speed, of course, is only for basic attacks, so you use it only if you use basic attacks. When it comes to chest, leg armor, I personally prefer to stack crit chance, crit damage from any sources I can get to get the most out of it, but sometimes defense and HP would take priority when I find myself dying a lot. So try to find the perfect balance between defense and HP. Keep in mind that the HP stat now stacks up and scales up with leveling, so it's not percent HP like it was before, but the crit chance is %1 and it's pretty useful whether it's a low level item or not. You can still get the most out of a crit chance item. So what else is left? The shoulders can give you crit chance, another good source of it, and they can also give stuff like burn duration, poison duration, bleeding duration. Keep that in mind, and also another good source of defenses. There are some weird legendaries like this one that you might want to try, or like this one that drops stalactites, or maybe if you decide to go for a two-handed setup, you would want to go for some rail hammer, but I would advise against going for rail hammers. Currently, two-handed weapons are twice as less useful as before update 9. Why? Because a legendary item has 3 secondary affixes, and when it comes to two-handed weapons, they don't add up enough bonuses to make up for losing extra 3 legendary affixes and another bit of primary affixes that you can get from an offhand. And now when it comes to enchanting, a legendary two-handed weapon would have one main affix, 3 legendary affixes, and I think up to 3 enchant slots. So that's 1 major plus 3 secondary plus 3 enchant affixes, 7 in total, or 1 plus 6, let's say. Whereas with 2 items you can get 1 plus 6 here and 1 plus 6 here, so that's twice the affixes, and two-handed weapon would not give you that much more damage in the major affix to make up for losing those possible enchant affixes. The only thing that would make legendary two-handed, or not legendary, but two-handed weapons worth picking over one-handed plus offhand would be to add 6 slots on two-handed for enchanting, and I don't think that's gonna happen soon. Hopefully they reconsider how they're approaching this, because currently they're making two-handed weapons less and less viable compared to one-handed and an offhand. When it comes to pets, I try to go for something with block chance, but there's a pretty decent knights that allow you to be immune to poison, just not you but the pet. And when it comes to the tax, I do like Bloodlust tax for extra crit chance, crit damage, but you can try and combine a Bloodlust tag with maybe one for poison. The Venomous Fang I think was the name. Just try to find whatever works fine. And there's Ember Heart as well for burning. I strongly suggest having at least one Bloodlust tag though, for that extra crit chance, crit damage and bleeding. For the pet skills, as I always say, my favorite combo is Deadlier Strikes combined with Screeching Stun, combined with Healing Friendship and Battle Cry. Screeching Stun would combine very well with this damage versus stunned, blinded or slowed targets, because you would have an extra source of stunning. I don't have those two, so I'm using whatever I have. If you don't have Deadlier Strikes, use whatever aura you've got. Keep in mind that block though is limited to 40%, so that 10% from here might be a bit of an overkill, and it might be better to just go for running partner if the choice is between those two. This is not bad, extra defense if you don't have crit chance, but the crit one seems to be the most useful, especially when it's 15%. That is a nice amount of crit chance. That's like 3 or 2.5 items worth of crit chance. 2.5 affixes, let's say, not items. And as I mentioned, for the relic weapons, pick whichever one you think you need. For poison setups, you might want the Bane for bleeding, the Blood Drinker for flaming, the Flaming Destroyer if you wanna spread some fire mayhem all around the map. So think about what gear you've got and combine it with the correct relic weapon. Your gear would change as you level up, you would be finding different ones, so something that was good but gave you bleeding might be changed by something that's good and uses fire. What's good is that the bleeding relic you get for free in some of the early quests. You get to craft one Blood Drinker via the quests, and it only costs one relic core, Ember core, if you wanna craft one. Whereas the other ones kind of got nerfed to oblivion and are kind of very hard to craft now, with 24 cores being the requirement. Hopefully this gets reduced to like 15 or 12, but for now everyone would be starting with a bleeding weapon, so use that until you get to craft another one. You might have to farm some bosses to get the other ones, and it will take a while, but keep in mind that contracts also award you cores from the Flaming Destroyer. You get 24 cores altogether if you get all the way to level 57. 24 cores, that's a lot, that's enough to craft one Flaming Destroyer. When it comes to playing the build, it is kind of straightforward. Spamming Spike Drive when needed to do AoE circular damage, and using Ghost Rain when we need to do damage to faraway targets or to lined up targets or just to a single target because it seems to be the better choice in such cases. Then we can also use Blasting Charge to apply vulnerability especially to elites and bosses for extra damage before we start spamming our damage skills. Hammer Spin can do some damage to trash mobs and even one-shot most of them in some difficulties, but it's mostly an escape skill and it's a movement skill that gives us the speed buff, so it's not mainly used for damage, but it can be. And then comes Lantern Flash, which is used to blind the enemies and also deal some fire damage to them. This skill comes with an amazing passive synergy, which allows us to do extra damage to blinded, stunned or slowed targets. This is a great synergy with Spike Drive, which can slow the enemies, and with itself because it can blind the enemies. So if you want to be able to stun the enemies, you might kind of decide to use something like Pound or gear that gives you chance to stun, or chance to slow, or chance to bind, or why not even an offhand that gives you bonuses to all three. But then you might have to sacrifice some endurance regen, so it's kind of like a balance act. Do you want more endurance regen for more spammability and sustain of the build, or do you want more crowd control to be able to do more damage to the crowd controlled targets? The rotation is simple. Blasting Charge to the buff and then Spike Drive or Ghost Rain. Of course, if you want to blind the targets, I'd assume it's better to blind them maybe either after the Blasting Charge or before the Blasting Charge, depending on whether you want Blasting Charge to do more damage to the blinded enemies or Lantern Flash to do more damage to the vulnerable enemies after they were hit with the dynamites. There's nothing too complicated, and I hope this is enough of a description of how to play the build. Thank you for watching this video, Struck Up. If you liked it, you can let me know by hitting the corresponding button, and the same goes if you didn't like it. If you want to be notified for more Torchlight Frontiers, Borderlands 3 or other Wooter content, you can subscribe to my channel and click the bell button. And in the meantime, keep it cool and until next time. Goodbye.